Hello everybody, this is Rindra'S and welcome to another Eternal News episode. We have two more spoilers in the last few days. I didn't want to make a video for just one spoiler, but the two spoilers we have right now are interesting enough. I figured to cover them, even though two cards is not a whole lot for a news video. But I can also assume you guys waiting for my take on the last two spoilers, especially given that they are fairly interesting. Alright, so let's take a look at the spoilers. First we have a really big one, Rindra'S choice. This is especially big because it automatically implies that there will be 4 more choices in the other color combinations that we are missing so far. So we get the remaining 5 choices to have the full set of 10 choices in all color combinations, as we would have been hoping probably since we saw the first choices. Alright, so this is a particularly good one. Like, this might be one of the best choices so far, like on par with, say, Eileen's choice. It kills an enemy unit with more than one faction. It's weird that it says more than one faction rather than multi-faction unit. Like, if I'm not remember that wrong, like other cards used to have the multi-faction wording, but maybe I'm just making this up and it just had single faction wording in that direction, and now they just go with like more than one faction. But the wording seems a bit clunky to me, and they could have just used kill an enemy unit, an enemy multi-faction unit, to just make it a little less wordy, since it's functionally the same. Anyway, killing multi-faction units as a fast spell for 2 is great. There's a lot of good targets for this in most decks, so it will come in very handy. And as a minor upside, you get to negate enemy multi-faction spells. Those are fairly limited, but there's still a bunch of relevant targets, and that's like the secondary mode. Like, I think I said this before, these choices usually have a primary and a secondary mode. The primary one is the one that applies most of the time and is very helpful, and that you will use most of the time. And the secondary one is like an alternative mode that adds some utility. So basically, if there is no good primary mode that you will usually use, the cards are pretty bad. Like, for example, Eileen's Choice primary mode is to kill an attacking unit with 4 attack or more, for example, or Azindal's Choice, the primary mode is the bounce, is the discard, because the bounce is card disadvantage and only something that you will occasionally use if you have to. And with Rindra'S Choice here, it's similar, except that it's a much better secondary mode in the sense, while it is narrow, it still is very powerful. 2 cost for negation effect is pretty solid, and while the targets are limited, you're still trading 1 for 1 and often get something more expensive than 2 power, so that's pretty good. And yeah, there's a bunch of stuff you can stop. Stand together, other choices, slay, what else? Combust, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that you can stop with this. Rise to the challenge, and so on and so forth. So it still has quite some nice utility there that shouldn't be ignored. And yeah, I'm excited to see what the other 4 choices are. This is definitely a good one and probably among the better ones of the new choices. I would be surprised if they're all this good or better, at least compared to like the other choices where a bunch of them were really bad. So we'll see. Maybe we saw the best of it already and we'll just get some meh other choices, or maybe we just get a whole lot more awesome choices than the others, which would be a bit unfair for the color combinations that ended up with crappy choices like Praxis or Ardenport, for example. But we'll see soon. And next we have the spoiler that just dropped a bit ago, Dramatist's Mask. So this is a 4-cost weapon that grants +1/+1 in charge, which doesn't do that much since you have to play the unit the same turn and then put the mask on it for the charge to be relevant the first time, but the card has a whole lot more text. At the start of your turn, sacrifice the wielder to play a random unit from your deck, then play a copy of Dramatist's mask on it. That's where the charge comes in, since the unit that you get from your deck would not be able to attack, and this way, yeah, you just get a unit that gets charged from the mask and +1/+1, and if it survives till the next turn, you get another random unit, so basically you cycle through like random units in your deck. I think the main problem here is that the card has to live for a whole turn cycle, so the opponent has a lot of chances to silence it, or even kill it, or simply kill the mask before it does anything, and then all you got is like a 4-cost +1/+1 weapon, which is pretty underwhelming. So it's extremely unreliable, while at the same time the way the card works makes you want to try and build around it and try to break it, but it's really like not very likely to break a card that is this vulnerable and this slow to take effect. This is kind of like a bad build around of the same type as Awaken. What was it? Awaken the... I to check the name of the card that we talked about last time. What was it? Answer the Call. Never mind, not Awaken something. Answer the Call. That's a really good build around. This is unfortunately an example of a pretty bad, vulnerable, situational and slow build around. So not expecting this card to do a whole lot, although the idea, the concept is kind of cool. But yeah, it's too fragile, too slow. Like, if the card would grant Aegis or something, then it would be a lot more appealing. But this way, I don't think you can rely on this card at all, and if you don't build around it, it's also not going to be very strong, very good. So yeah, looks cool on the surface, but unfortunately really bad card in my opinion. So not much else to say here. And I guess the one thing we can say here is we saw another legendary of the legendaries in the set. That is definitely a nice thing, but that's about it. Alright, that's it again for this Eternal News episode with the 2 latest spoilers. Really excited to see the other 4 choices, because the first one we saw so far looks pretty promising. I hope the others are similarly good. Like Rindra'S choice is basically a way better Caleb's choice, because Caleb's choice kind of has no real primary mode, since the primary mode is kind of like the counter a mono faction spell, which is a pretty bad and narrow primary mode. So basically both modes on Caleb's choice are kind of narrow secondary modes, while Rindra'S choice has a strong, and yet a bit narrow primary mode and a solid secondary mode effectively. Alright, this was Eternal News with the latest spoilers. I'm Manu S, and I thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.